everyone, I welcome you to this new live session with H&N International, this time in a special roundtable format. I'm Juliana Armijo, Key Account Manager for South America. Today, we are very pleased to share with you an in-depth interview with Dr. Kleyn to get the key aspects about layer nutrition. And who better than our CEO and nutritionist specialist, Xavier Arbe, to join us in this roundtable discussion. Hi, Xavier, welcome. How are you today?
Good morning, Juliana. Doing well. Hello from Bangkok.
So it's already night for you? While here in Chile, I'm just starting my day.
Yeah, here we are finishing. This is the challenge of working in international companies. Not somebody is waking up, others are thinking of going to bed, or at least not going to bed because we still have some talk to do.
Yeah.
Let's see how it goes.
Well, I think Dr. Kleyn hardly needs an introduction, so let's get right into it. If you have any question, please raise them in LinkedIn comments, and Xavier will be answering live at the end of the interview. And remember, in case of technical problems on LinkedIn, there is a backup broadcast on the H&N website, and you can also find this on our YouTube channel. The links will be in the LinkedIn comments. Well, let's begin with a question we love to ask. It's a fun way to break the ice and get to know the person behind the professional. Dr. Kleyn, what's your favorite recipe with eggs?
That's an easy one to answer, and it's a simple one. Creamy scrambled eggs and smoked salmon. Not the way they cook scrambled eggs in most hotels. That's not creamy. You've just got to do it slowly. And on a pan that's not too hot, and take your time and be patient, and then it comes out beautifully. Most hotels do it on a pan that's too hot, and they dry it out.
That sounds delicious. It's funny because it is breakfast time here in Chile, and even though we have a lot of salmon here, I've never tried scrambled eggs with it. Xavier, what about you? What is your favorite egg recipe?
Well, when I'm traveling and if I have time, I like to eat the eggs Benedict because I'm too lazy to make them at home. But then when I'm at home, I think the easiest one, and I really love it, a little bit with bread, it's fried eggs. Fried eggs, but I would say is that if I can, and if I can afford, with olive oil, that is always expensive, but it's the most delicious option.
Mm-hmm. And is there one that really caught your attention during your travels around the world?
Well, sometimes, you have these hotels that they make like these kind of huge omelets with a lot of vegetables. So those tend to be quite good because you mix all kind of things and they always get surprises on the flavor. But I mean, I guess that too much traveling, Juliana, same as you, we travel a lot of places, and at the end you lose a little bit of track of your favorite places.
Yes. I'm curious, which egg recipes do you love the most? Let us know in the comments. Well, let's move on to our first technical question for Dr. Kleyn. What do you see as the biggest challenges in layer nutrition?
I guess the biggest challenge and the question I'm asked the most at the moment is how do we continue to have good egg production and good egg quality in late lay. And I think many people think that once we're in late lay, now's the time to do something to prevent potential problems, and particularly with regards eggshell quality. But the truth is that the way you've got to manage it is you've got to start in rear and make sure that the skeleton is properly developed and you have adequate skeletal reserves of calcium, and hopefully manage the bird throughout its life so that it's got enough calcium in its bones at 70 weeks of age. What people forget is if they don't feed the bird for 2 days, you completely deplete the skeletal calcium reserves that are there. And the other mistake I see made is people love this pre-lay diet, and then they feed it for too long, and they deprive their best birds going into peak production of calcium. And you don't see a problem then because there's still enough calcium around, but you see the effect of that when they get old. So I reckon that's my biggest challenge, and to explain to people that you've got to start looking after this bird at point of lay in order to get a good eggshell and good quality, egg quality and good production at the end of lay. So a concept people seem to struggle with. So that's the one issue. And then the other issue is the perennial one, is how much lysine is enough or how much lysine is not enough. And the breeder guides now are much better. They all have got a similar value. But what they never tell you is that's if you're selling graded eggs. And many of the areas I work in, eggs are sold ungraded. And there's no benefit in producing big eggs. So it makes sense to feed significantly lower protein levels than recommended by the breeding companies in those circumstances. So, and it's a thing that's not very clear in many people's minds. So I guess those are the two major issues I have. There are many others, but those would be the two in terms of laying hen nutrition, the two that we seem to perennial problems. Yeah, well, I think one of the marvels of modern poultry breeding, layer breeding, is the fact that they have managed to lengthen the layer cycle, and they've managed to reduce the number of pause days in lays. So you've got more eggs in the given period. And if you lengthen the cycle, then you've got more eggs per hen housed. And if one looks at sustainability, and I've just been sitting in sustainability sessions in the meeting, this single thing is more sustainable than all the things people are talking about in feed, is the fact that we're producing more eggs per hen housed. And commercially, people are achieving these values even with brown hens. They may not be going to 100 weeks of age, but they're certainly going to 95 without any problem. And they're still at excellent production. So the modern genotypes are absolutely amazing. But the problem in long life is eggshell quality, managing the liver, and we're particularly bad at managing the liver because we only ever look at dead birds. We never look at live birds to see what a good, healthy, producing bird's liver looks like. And plumage is an issue in Africa because spent hens are sold, but if they don't have feathers, then nobody wants to buy them. And then, of course, the degeneration of the oviduct is a long-term problem. I believe that the breeding companies are able to do something about it, but that the heritability is low, so it's going to take a period of time. Look, I mean, you can feed lipotropic nutrients. Choline is the one that springs to mind, but I want to say biotin is another one, but I'm trying to think of betaine is what I'm trying to think of. Betaine and choline seem to be methyl donors that seem to help the liver. But without sounding like a salesman, I think the one that works best is probably 2,5-hydroxy-D3. And it doesn't help to start feeding it when they're in old age. it needs to be fed from point of lay. And I was with a client last week who's got 1 million laying hens, and we've been using it for several years now. And I said, this stuff's really expensive. Should we take it out? And the farm manager said, no, whatever you do, don't take that stuff out, because we can actually see the difference in the birds. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the feathering is so much better. And I can only assume that improved feathering is as a result of improved liver function. I don't know why else it would be. So that's the nutrient that I think, well, it is a nutrient, but an additive that is probably going to be the most exciting. And the other one is phytase. And Doug Corver has done some really nice work where he showed higher phytase levels in pullet rearing gave enhanced skeletal development. And that's exactly what we want. We want enhanced skeletal development so that we have better calcium reserves when the birds go into lay, and hopefully those calcium reserves will last longer. You know, in the old days when we had lots of pause days, the bird was actually able to recoup some of the calcium losses. But now we've managed to breed birds that don't have pause days. It's even more difficult to recoup those calcium losses. And the birds that we see going off their legs, and the birds that we see with bad livers, are generally the best layers in your flock. They're the superstars. Because they've never missed a day in their lives. I did some work on 90-week-old hens, and we looked at the livers, and we scored them. And the great big fat yellow hemorrhagic livers were there, and there were some beautiful pristine red livers. And you know what the difference was? The birds that were not laying eggs had perfect livers. The birds that had stopped laying had perfect livers, and the birds that were laying had hemorrhagic livers. So, I think we don't understand managing the liver. I don't think we understand the importance of it. And it would really be nice if we could measure liver health using some kind of a biomarker, maybe at 35 weeks of age or 45 weeks of age, I don't know, so that we knew where we were going to be at 70 weeks of age. So those are I think the liver and the skeletal, or the calcium content of the skeleton are going to be the two things that are going to be the most important going forward. And I mean, we're talking about 100 weeks now. It's not going to be long before we're talking 110 or 120 weeks. It's the next logical step.
Javier, do you see the same challenges as Dr. Kleyn?
It's not an easy question to answer, but I have to say that I agree with Rick that the challenges that he's mentioning, they are usually common things that we see when we visit egg producers around the world. It's always a challenge to ask egg producers to invest in the pullet when it's not laying eggs. Mm-hmm. So that's really, it's not easy to tell somebody to put money in something that is not going to give you a quick return as it is in egg production. No? So
yes, I agree.
That's one of the things that I think is also, it's not only nutritional challenge, but I think also is a philosophical challenge or concept of how the business is set up. No, saying that, I would like to add something that he was mentioning about the liver health, and especially in these long-term productions. I mean, right now, our chief geneticist, David Cabero, he is already preparing hens or developing the hens to be until 120 weeks of age. So liver, it's very important, and I would say I would like to add is that one of the biggest challenges for the nutrition is to think about adding some oil, some added fat in the diets. It's well known that protects very well the liver, but you know what, Juliana? It's expensive.
Yes, I agree.
And the nutritionists, they have a lot of pressure for making cheap feed, and there is a lot of pressure around that one. But a hen that is not producing, that has a fatty liver or is dying, is not laying any eggs. So that's one of the, I would say, one of my challenges related with what Rick was mentioning. Is really tricky, the discussion of least cost formulation versus what is the best for the birds.
Totally. Moving on to our next question. What are the most common mistakes in formulation?
I guess the thing I see most that concerns me and is unnecessary is very high calcium levels in the diet. People seem to think that as the bird gets older, if they increase the calcium level to, I see 4.5% or more, they're going to solve the problem. And I have a suspicion that sometimes that creates a problem, because it really does buffer the feed and change the taste, and I can't see the point in it. It's very interesting in these old birds at 90 weeks of age, and I must assume that most of the skeletal calcium would have been depleted by 90 weeks of age. Those birds utilize calcium with almost exactly 50% efficiency. So they were pretty much using the dietary calcium to produce eggs on a daily basis at 50%. And I think that's probably the true availability of calcium. And if you consider that you need 2.2 grams of calcium per gram of egg, and you're utilizing it with 50% efficiency, you only need about 4.5 grams of calcium, even in an old bird. And feeding more and more calcium does not solve the problem. What I also see is people feed very high phosphorus levels at the end, and what little bit of calcium uptake there is inhibited by high levels of phosphorus. So the only the only company I've seen that's made a significant recognition of this problem is actually H&N in their tables. The only company that have got really low phosphorus levels in old age. All the others have got these very high levels. Look, you can have high levels of protein and low levels of protein. Those are not problems from a physiological point of view. They may be a problem from an economic point of view, but that's another discussion for another day. But I think the high calcium levels people feed can be detrimental.
Javier, what is your opinion on this? Do you agree with the approach regarding calcium and phosphorus levels in laying hens?
Well, I think that with the phosphorus, I cannot disagree, because those are our recommendations, no? But I mean, I have to say, jokes apart, the excess of calcium, sometimes it's based on feelings, and also the nutritionist is under pressure to do something. So when there is a problem of eggshell quality, so let's do something, we increase the eggshell, let's increase the calcium so we can improve the eggshell quality. Definitely an excess of calcium is not good. I think it's like all the nutrients, there is a threshold that above that one you are not going to have any effect, and if you keep increasing you are going to have a negative effect. And in the case of phosphorus, definitely, I mean, if you see the literature, after 30 weeks, there are no many needs of phosphorus, because I mean the bird is already grown up, and the production of egg doesn't really need much phosphorus. So we really push, and I agree with Rick that we really need to push the levels of phosphorus down. Saying that one, it's also important to take into account the feed intake of the birds when you are adjusting the diets. But yes, we need to push them, because also the phosphorus interferes the absorption of the calcium. So sometimes when I see some of the diets worldwide, instead of asking them to increase the levels of calcium, I said, can we reduce the phosphorus, and perhaps you have a little better absorption? Of course, I mean, for the discussion, calcium, phosphorus, there are a lot of topics like the particle size, the solubility of the calcium, and all these kind of things, no? And also, in addition, the effect of the phytates in the diets, especially in layers that they are old birds. So, I mean, I think it's something that we need to take into account, that sometimes we play safe, and there is enough literature to take at least some baby steps on the way of modifying perhaps how we are doing the things so far.
Perfect. Dr. Kleyn, could you give us an overview of the research and studies you've worked on?
Well, I've done some work on working with individual birds. It almost started as a joke. I did an experiment in 1985, and I repeated it in 2017 with almost exactly the same experimental design, which was looking at protein and energy utilization in individually house-laying birds. And I was able to show pretty conclusively that the efficiency of energy utilization has not changed, and nor has the efficiency of protein utilization, lysine utilization. So through all the selection that the primary breeding companies have achieved, they haven't changed the underlying biochemistry. I did a third experiment with 90-week-old birds, as I've mentioned, and those birds did use more energy and more protein per egg, principally because so many of them have stopped laying. So it skews the data. But in fact, those birds that were laying at a normal rate were utilizing protein and energy at the same level as the 1985 birds. So what I want to say is that I don't think we've improved the efficiency of utilization of nutrients. What I did notice is that the modern bird is smaller and it lays smaller eggs, which means that if the efficiency of nutrient utilization hasn't changed, the de facto nutrient requirements of a modern laying hen are lower than the requirements of their historic counterparts, because they're smaller and they lay a smaller egg. Yeah, sure, they lay more eggs in their lifetime, but we don't feed them for their lifetime. We feed them on a daily basis. And it's part of the efficiency that the breeding companies have built in to utilize feed more efficiently. And yet we just continually increase our feed specifications, and I sometimes wonder if we know what we're doing. I'm not exempt from this, I must be honest. I look at diets I formulated 20 years ago and compare them to the diets today, and there's very much more protein in them. And I don't know why.
Javier, what's your opinion on the protein excesses often seen in laying hens diets?
Well, I would say that a lot of times when I see them, the first one are driven by, first, the fear of the nutritionist about the quality of the raw materials that they have. So it's like a safety measure. That, again, is a safety measure that it costs money. And the other one is also sometimes driven by the excess of amino acids that we are putting in the diets. It's not very common to see research in laying hens, and it's glad to hear Rick. He's doing his own research, and he has the possibilities of doing those kind of things, because we know that it's not easy to make research in layers, and especially in this part of the protein, I have to say is that recently H&N has done new research that probably we will be able to share in the next months in one of these sessions, and also we will publish. So we have already published some of the papers, but we will publish more information that can help in that discussion. However, I have to say one thing. People is not going to feel comfortable with what the data that we are going to show, because we have seen, just like appetizer, is that you really can go to very, very low levels of crude protein without affecting the performance of the chicks. But I know that my colleagues in profession, when they see that, because I have shown some data on preliminary data, they really tell me, "Are you crazy?" Or probably that's the most polite thing that they have told me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think is as I said, we need to keep learning. We have to keep ourselves sharp and taking baby steps and see what we can push and what limits we can push in the diets. No?
Mm-hmm. It's true. Dr. Kleyn, what has been the most fascinating advancement you've seen in your career?
Easy. It's phytase. You know, even a single dose of phytase saves about 5 kilos of mineral phosphate per ton of feed, and mineral phosphate costs almost €1 a kilo. So you can imagine what the savings to the layer industry phytase has brought about. There's no doubt that if you go to higher levels of phytase, you enhance the skeletal development, and I suspect you probably enhance eggshell quality as well, because we know from broilers that phytase significantly alters the calcium, phosphorus utilization and the efficiency of utilization. And we see it in broilers, the bone ash increases by about 50% the minute you add phytase to the diet. So I think the answer has to be phytase. You know, phytase has been around a long time, and the only people who actually started using it commercially were the Dutch, because they had a lot of legislative pressure on them to reduce their phosphorus excretion in their agricultural, in their laying birds. And it took the world a long time to grasp what a significant additive it was. And it always makes me feel a little sorry for people who sell feed additives, because I know even the best one took 10 years to be accepted. So if you come with product X and think you're going to take the market, commercial nutritionists are a very conservative bunch. And so it's very widely used. But then we have the crazy situation where one of the primary breeding companies in broilers say you shouldn't use it for broiler breeders. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why, if it works perfectly well in commercial laying hens, we shouldn't use it in broiler breeders. It's just nonsense. So I guess what I'm saying to you is we, as a profession, are bad at transferring data from broilers to laying hens to breeders. And I'll give you a classic example. They've just discovered that calcium in breeding hens and broilers, if you've got a coarse calcium, you have a slower calcium release, but an enhanced absorption of calcium. They published this, and it's really exciting. But go back in the literature, we knew that in the 1970s in laying hens. Exactly the same data. Why do we feed grit to laying hens? Because we know this thing. So we're really bad at transferring data from sections of our poultry.
Javier, phytase appears to have been a major breakthrough in the industry. What do you think?
Yeah, it was. I mean, for me, it was not so big, because when I started working here, and I'm not going to disclose when, the phytase was already there. So in my case, it was quite common to use the phytase. Sorry. I know that some people were a little bit perhaps hesitant at that moment, but I mean, now you can see the phytase is very extended. And in my case, probably I was trying to make some memory, and probably one of the most interesting, let's say, not in the product side, but probably in the technology related to making diets, it was the NIR. It really gave us a new tool to understand the quality of the raw materials. Again, there are a lot of discussions that we can have about the NIR, how good is the information, quantitative information that you get from NIR compared to the qualitative information that you also could get. But I guess that would be my take in this case. I mean, phytase, definitely, it saves a lot of money.
Perfect. Let's take a break. If you need some coffee or make a brief call, now is the moment. 3 minutes and we'll come back. If you want to stay, we have some interesting videos for you. To the audience, remember sending your questions in the comments here on LinkedIn. Dr. Kleyn, in your opinion, which areas do you think need the most investment in research?
I am concerned that the data and the research that has been, not much has been conducted in the data, even less so, of layer pullets. I don't know how many pullets there are in the world. I mean, laying hens there are in the world. How many million? 200 million? Let's say 200 million. And we need to replace them every 2 years. So we're producing 100 million pullets a year. And they utilize 6 kilos of feed. So you must know how much feed we're feeding to layer pullets a year on the planet. And if you look at the breeder company recommendation, they say that the phosphorus requirement in rear and development should be 4 grams per kilo. broilers are working at 2.8. And the broilers are growing 100 grams a day. And the pullet is growing 5 or 10 grams a day. It has to be wrong. It just has to be wrong. And I think there's huge opportunity for us to be very much more sustainable in terms of phosphorus use. But everything else that goes along with phytates, we know the minute you start using phytates, you can use cheap ingredients because you've got space in the ration. I really reckon that a neglected area of our profession is pullet rearing. And there's a paper that was published by Van Eck last year, 2024. I don't know whether you've seen it, where they fed highline birds at the breeder recommendation, and then minus 10% nutrient density and plus 10% nutrient density. So between the high and the low is a 20% difference. And they reared these birds according to these diets. And the major difference at point of lay was that the birds fed on the high nutrient density diets were a bit fatter. That's all. Body weights were a bit higher, but they reckon it was fat. They then put them on a common laying diet. Guess what happened? They all laid exactly the same number of eggs and the same size of egg. So I just look at the paper and it doesn't mention anywhere the cost saving they would have brought about if they'd used the 10% less than the nutrient standard. And I think there's huge opportunity for us to do things differently. Again, the lysine level recommendation for rear, if you go and work out how many milligrams of lysine the bird is consuming, it's about twice as many milligrams of lysine per gram of gain as a typical broiler. So we must be overfeeding these things. We must be.
Javier, do you believe there is such limited research during the pullet period?
Oh yeah, I fully agree. And it's nobody's fault and everybody's fault. We have to realize is that when you are investing money in the pullets, the same way that the egg producers don't want to invest, also it's difficult to invest the money in the research of the pullets, because if you invest something in let's say you do some research in the first 5 weeks and you want to see the effect in 90 weeks, it's a hell of a trial, no? It's a long-term trial. And just imagine if you are a PhD student and you say, okay, I'm going to make a PhD in layers. And what are you going to test? Oh, I'm going to evaluate the levels of, I don't know, the lysine or the levels of calcium in the pullets and the effect in production. It's a big risk. Now your PhD is not 5 years, could become 10 years.
Yeah, another career.
Another career, this is, and also it's risky, no? Because if something is not working or you have a disease or whatever, all your research is gone, no?
Mm-hmm,
So,
exactly.
But it's needed. It's needed because those levels were developed long time ago. And and the development of the pullet in the 5 first weeks, we know that is key, or first 6 weeks, but are those levels correctly? Can we help? The latest information I saw from the point of view of the levels was done based on the energy and the particle size. And now everybody is using, when they have problems in the farms, they are using crumble feed to improve the growth of the pullets at the beginning. And also they have seen that the fiber is important from the feed intake development. But these are things that they were, part of that research was started 20 years ago. So probably not too many news about pullets that we can say, but still there are places that they are not applied these kind of good practices, because we know that they can help in the production or the productivity in the long term, no? Okay,
right.
It is what it is. We have another little bird that is more muscle that is called broiler, and those guys, I mean, in 35 days are out. You can make a lot of trials. They have a lot of volume, so it's clear that the money goes in that direction.
Yeah.
In the meantime, in H&N, we will keep trying to do our research, and you know that we have this farm in Turkey, that we have our own feed trials. So okay, it's not as fast as we wish, but at least we are getting solid information that we hope we can share with the market, and it will be appreciated.
Perfect. Now let's delve into a hot topic at ESPN 2025, sustainability.
Well, I have lots of opinions about sustainability. The issue with sustainability is one needs to appreciate that there are different components to it. And the first is obviously the environment. So we want to reduce our demand for products. Phosphate is a good example, but protein would be another example. And we want to reduce the potential pollutants that we have in our manure. So that's the environmental component. And then there's an ethical component, and that has to do with the health and welfare of the birds we feed, but then the health and welfare of the people who consume that feed. There's a third component, which is a bit of a cynical one, is that individuals are very worried about their own welfare first, welfare of self, and not necessarily welfare of the birds or anything else. And celebrity chefs do not help our cause when they tell you that you must eat organic eggs because they're healthier for you and they taste better. And a lot of people watch Jamie Oliver. So this is a problem. And then the last thing, of course, the economic aspect. If you don't make money, you can't be in business. So somehow we have to find a way to balance all three aspects of sustainability simultaneously. And just looking at the environmental footprint, just looking at the welfare, and just looking at the money is not the way to go about it. And this morning I heard some talks that just looked at the welfare and just looked at the environment, but didn't look at the money. The point about sustainability, I always say, I think it's a journey. It's not a destination. We're never going to be truly sustainable unless we all stop having children. But what we've got to do is we've got to move all three aspects together, and there's got to be a balance. And I mean, there's no sensible poultryman who wants poor welfare, because birds that are not happy are not performing. So these things do go hand in hand. But we were talking about slow-growing broilers and in our discussion group today. And the one guy says, yes, but the carbon footprint of slow-growing broilers is 37% higher than standard broilers. And that just makes no sense whatsoever. And I think that's pretty much an established fact. Well, they eat 30%, 7% more feed. So we need to have a dose of realism, and a few more hungry people in Europe would be good. Like Africa, we worry about feeding people, not about whether the chicken's happy or not.
Javier, are these numbers you are seeing in the field? And different areas, is sustainability understood differently?
Yes, I think sustainability is a huge topic, and it's not an easy one. And I guess in each region, each area of the world understand in a different way, what the priorities. I mean, we need to take into account that the concept of sustainability goes around 17 points. So which one are you going to push more? Which one you are going to create more action plans around these 17 points is clearly different based on the areas. No, I mean, it's true that in Europe one of the focuses goes into the welfare part, but as Rick was mentioning, the part of the resources is not so well covered when going to this kind of pushing in this kind of direction, no? And then the priority of these different areas. What is first, no? The animal welfare or the human welfare? So it's a different. It's not easy. It's not an easy discussion, and especially because it's so broad, the spectrum of the topic, that to pinpoint one thing, I'm sustainable because of this, I'm sustainable because of that, and you might be losing other factors in the whole equation.
Yeah.
So I think we need 1 hour and more points of view, more overviews with a different perspective around the world. But I think it's a valid topic, and it's always going to be there in the media, in the different criteria that how we approach this concept of sustainability.
Exactly. And the last question for Dr. Kleyn. Could you share an interesting paper you've read recently?
Yeah, I think that the Van Eck paper on pullet rearing is really interesting. It's got a lot of useful information in it. I'm not sure that they've drawn all the correct conclusions, but have a look at it and decide for yourself. I think everything has changed in that we are using different housing systems, and birds, because of that, have different eating patterns and different habits. But the underlying nutrition, the protein and energy component, has not changed. So in the future, we're going to have to learn how to manage the birds we have in the facilities we have and match their feed intake patterns with the diets. Perhaps I should have mentioned that the 3 flocks of birds I fed individually were all perfectly capable of adjusting their feed intake according to the nutrient content of the diet. So the bird has that physical ability to completely adjust its own feed intake. The trouble is, the minute you put it into a group of cohorts, that doesn't always happen, because the small birds get intimidated and they don't get enough, and the big birds get too much, and that is a problem. So what happens with individual birds doesn't necessarily translate to commercial situations, which makes doing experiments quite difficult.
Javier, what is your opinion on research in layers?
Well, I think I mentioned a little bit in my previous comment. It's not easy to make it. You need to invest a lot of money. But usually when you see a paper, you must read it. And I think the recommendation of Rick is quite interesting. I don't know, we will try to invite her to present, or at least to give us her thoughts about the paper and what it can be. I know that there isn't so much research in layers. So when you see something, then everyone just jumps and read it very, very carefully. So I think any good opportunity of getting a good paper, good publication that can create some awareness or can bring some new ideas, then we can discuss if they are good, or we don't believe them, or I don't agree, or it's too uncomfortable. It makes it too uncomfortable. But I think it's welcome, and we have to try to keep doing these kind of things, because the future is that to have the hen for a long time in production. So research is needed, because we don't know much of what the hell, I'm sorry the word, is happening after 70 weeks. Not only nutrition, also I'm thinking also from Juliana, from the veterinary point of view, what happens with the immunity. We vaccinate the last kill vaccine probably 12 weeks, and what do you expect, that then those hens at 90 weeks are going to have good titles?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's not only from nutrition, but I think we need more support there to do more, I mean, learning of what is happening to the hen, no?
Yeah, totally agree. The audience was very shy today. There are not questions. Xavier, some you want to add?
Well, I mean, we give them some time, but in the meantime, definitely what I want to do is give a special thanks to Rick Kleyn. I know that he's traveling. As far as I know, I think he's in Thailand somewhere, giving one of his master classes on broiler nutrition, as far as I know. So definitely, I want to thank him for getting involved in this little experiment and accepting our challenge of these questions that not are always easy to answer. So really, Rick, thank you very much, and also the audience that is watching this one, and of course the ones that they could be watching later on. Thank you for your support of checking off our presentations of these kind of things, because it really encourages us to keep doing these kind of things and bring you some knowledge in different ways.
Well, we have one question before we go. What influence feed intake in layer hens?
What is the influence of the feed intake?
Yes.
How much time do we have? I
Take
mean,
your time.
feed intake capacity is everything. I think one of the things that we have seen is that the feed intake capacity, especially at the start of the production, is one of the things that we have to develop and have it from the pullet ready. And as long as we can develop that the feed intake capacity, we increase the crop size, the gut size in general. The start of the production is going to be better. And with a good production, start of the production, then life, it becomes easier in the production. Then later on, definitely the feed intake is going to be limited by the housing conditions. That is going to be, let's say, is like how comfortable the birds are. I mean, I know that sometimes we try to save some money in the houses, but that's something that later on, if the birds are not comfortable, they will ask us to do some nutritional trickery that it doesn't really work. So the feed intake capacity will be diminished or affected. So then we have to spend money there. And then I think Rick was also mentioning, it's like when you put birds in a group, the behavior of the birds change. And Juliana, you know that we've been always discussing a lot and fighting for the feeder space. Not so much density, more about the feeder space.
Yeah.
Because the hens don't know how to share. And they always fight for what is in front of them, what is the feed available. So if you don't make enough feeder space, the feed intake gets affected, and they spend more time fighting, and not all the birds are eating what the nutritionist has designed. So, as I said, I think that was quite quick, my answer about feed intake, but feed intake is everything, because at the end is nutrient intake, no? As a nutritionist, we make diets, and we hope that the birds are going to eat as much as corn, as much as soya, as much as byproducts, as much as. So if we don't have the feed intake, we don't have the nutrient intake. So then the formulation, who cares about it?
Perfect. We have another question.
Okay.
Have you seen an increase in legislation to limit the use of medicinal chemicals in broilers rearing operation? What are the alternatives?
Well, I mean, definitely there is a trend, and this is something that we need to think about it. Like all of us that we are in the food chain, it's important that we do the things as professional as possible. And we know that the antibiotics and the growth promoters, they have They have an effect, and they had an effect, but also we know that they have an impact in the food chain. So I think we see more and more legislation about that one. Then the implementation is different, okay? You see the legislation, but then the implementation tends to be slow. So from the point of view of alternatives, the first thing I would say is, and especially if we are talking about layers, and most of the layer feed is in mash, so the important thing is to have a good HACCP system, a good HACCP system in the feed mills where we can control the quality of the raw materials, because we don't make the pellet in layers, no? So we don't have the heat treatments, so we really need to work and invest a lot of money in the quality of the raw materials. And then on top of that, we need to create some kind of gut health program. Usually it's going to be a combination of products that they are going to work in the raw materials or in the upper part of the gut with the lower part of the gut. I have to tell you that I haven't seen 2 programs of gut health the same. So you see that you have different choices. There are different choices in the market, but I would say is that the first thing I would say is whatever you do is not going to be as effective as an antibiotic. Correct, Juliana? When we get sick, we really need antibiotic. Some herbs can help if we are not very sick, but if we are really sick, antibiotics are the best option. So first, limit the exposures with a HACCP system, hygiene control of the raw materials, and then think about something that it will work for you in a consistent manner. No magic. There are no magic. We have a colleague that says there are no magic powders, correct?
Yes.
So totally we need to stick to the science and try to make the best choices.
Perfect. Another question.
Okay, we are getting, the address is getting on fire.
Yes. What if the chicken can reach its ideal consumption on the catalog?
I guess that's probably in the rearing. No, Juliana is referring to the rearing.
I think, I don't know.
Well, I mean, if they are not getting the ideal feed intake, I mean, if it's in the brooding area, definitely I will start checking about the temperatures of the house, but also water temperature, and a little bit check the humidity. So because I would say is most of the egg producers around the world, and also I would say the nutritionists, they know how to make the pullet feed. So they are not really restricting too much. I mean, the pullet feed is quite energetic in that perspective. So I will start first, work more in the management side, that the temperature is there, the water is available. So I will check those little things. And then the other limiting factor that especially in pullets is going to be the feeder space. Be aware that now you can put more pullets in each cage in general, because they are wider, but the feeder space remains the same. So we have seen is that sometimes pullets are not getting 4.5 centimeters after 3 weeks, and that is really limiting the feed intake. Okay, then of course you are going to have limitations that it could be because of your weather conditions, that is too hot. So in this case, you really need to go to a little bit more concentrated diets. Also keep them in the balance. Help the birds with cool water, because that is going to stimulate the feed intake. And then a combination of lighting program, that if you are not getting the body weight, just don't go so aggressive in the step down. And then I have to say that Fernando, our colleague veterinarian, I hope he's listening and he agrees with what I was saying. If not, he will write something. But I say a slower step down, and also definitely, the midnight snack. Usually The midnight snack, we use it in egg production to increase the feed intake and eggshell quality, but also doing it in the proper way. You can do it also in rearing and have an additional that feed intake that can help you to get the body weight that you need. I'm not expert in that kind of midnight snacking pullets, but definitely just drop us a message, and our colleague Fernando will answer you. That he is our global veterinary service, and he's our expert, in-house expert from this kind of lighting programs.
Perfect. We have one comment from Carlos de la Cruz.
Yes.
We are more than ready to read your paper on low protein diets. Looking forward for this.
Yes. We have still a lot of the job to do, but yeah, hopefully we can publish as soon as possible everything. So I mean, and it's not only me. I have to thank all the nutrition team of H&N, Ahmed Abpulat in Turkey, who is running the farm with the help there of our partner, and also Emilio Scapaticcio, our other nutritionist in the team who has been supporting all the trial and helping us in the design. So this is a team effort, and hope we can publish all the information soon.
Perfect. Another question. Using 1% vegetable oil, I think, layer feeds could impact life, pointing, I think, yes, pointing fatty liver disease.
Yes.
Love answer from, I can see that.
If you ask me how much we should put, when I visit customers, I say this at least 2%. 1% is good. Yes, it's better than 0.5, because many times I see a diet that is mainly corn, soya, starch, protein, no oil at all. So let's say 1%, it's a good start. 2%, I would say, is better. In our research farm that I was mentioning before, we have done trials with 2% of added oil. In this case was soya oil, but also it could be palm oil, coconut oil. And I can tell you is that we didn't see any fatty livers, and we kept those birds until 110 weeks in production. We had other issues because we did other type of trials, but no fatty livers, no mortality because fatty livers. So I'm really, I mean, you are going to say, Xavier, you are making my feed more expensive. I said, yes, you are right. But also I'm saving you some of the most productive hens, as Rick was mentioning. The most productive hens are the ones that they need that fat, as the ones that we have to protect the liver.
Mm-hmm. We were able to run a low protein trial for laying hens during peak production, and we noticed that the performance was unaffected. But the most interesting result was some marginal deleterious effects on bone breaking straight with reduced protein diets. You have noticed anything like that?
No, unfortunately, we didn't have the resources to do that one. We were more focused in our research on controlling the egg size through the whole life. So what I don't know, I mean, I don't know, that's part of that we can discuss in another moment, but what we saw is that there is really, how to say, a booster effect in the low crude protein diets from the point of view of the utilization of the amino acids. The lower, at the end, what we know is when you have an excess of nitrogen in the diet, that nitrogen has to be excreted. And for that, you use resources like energy and things like that. So when you remove that, waste or expense of energy that you shouldn't do it, the bird becomes much more efficient. and you really can go much lower, not only crude protein, but also with the amino acids. I mean, I think I'm not going to disclose too much, but we were at least 140 milligrams less per day of amino acids to get the same egg mass that we were targeting usually in our management guides. What is a lot of money, even with a 2% of added fat.
What would the best grow profile for raising the H&N layer?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Juliana?
Yes. What would be the best grow profile for raising the H&N layer?
I don't really understand what would be the best profile, probably in the nutrition, I guess.
I don't know. If Marco...
I mean, if I understood correctly, I would say it's like, okay, if you want to raise our H&N birds, the best way I would say is, okay, in the pullets, not much mystery until week 10. From week 10 to week 16, try to develop the feed intake capacity, low energy diets with a little bit of fiber to develop the feed intake capacity. And then you know that we don't recommend anymore the pre-lay. We are recommending the hybrid feed that is going to stimulate the feed intake and also is going to support the start of the production. And then later on, our recommendation is always in production is feed based on the egg mass that the hens are producing and also the target egg weight that you are looking for. More or less, that's in a short way how I can answer, if I understood correctly the question. Sorry if I didn't.
Muhammad, I hope the name is correct. As Rick said, choline chloride or betaine are good for better liver health. Would you recommend it? Any water soluble pathosupportive things?
Hey. Thank you for the difficult question, because this goes a little bit from the point of the philosophy. Definitely the betaine and the chlorine chloride, they really help. And there is enough science showing that it can help in that liver protection. So definitely those levels, those two products, they need to take into account. Then adding into the water. I mean, I'm not very friend of adding things in the water because it tend to be costly. When you have to do something, yes, for sure, water is the more direct way of doing things. But if you are going to think about in the long-term things, I rather do it in the feed. Water, I put it for the emergencies. And also, Juliana, I'm sure that you have some bad experiences with some products in the drinking water that suddenly they block all the pipes. And then what you were trying to fix, it becomes even a bigger nightmare. So, I mean, I'm not against of adding products in the drinking water, but I would say it's more in the emergency situations and not in the long-term sustainable way.
Perfect. What about using byproducts of the slaughterhouse on production by use multi-enzymes, I think?
Well, I mean, the byproducts of the slaughterhouse, I would say like any other raw material. If you know what it has, you can manage it and you can go to use high levels. I mean, I remember that some of the Australian nutritionists, they are using meat and bone meal around 10% in layer diets. And also in the US, they are using 6 to probably 8%. But Australians probably are the most aggressive ones. But I think they do because the quality usually of the meat and bone meal from Australia tends to be more consistent. And one of the things that we have to realize is that when we have a contract of meat and bone meal or byproducts from the slaughterhouses, they tend to be very variable. Because sometimes you have hoofs, skin, not really good pieces. And then in other batch, you have better quality, no? So, I mean, it's not bad to use it, but the quality and the variability of the product tends to have challenges. And also it's a heat-treated product, so you might have some overcooked raw materials. But again, soya also could be overcooked. And nobody stops using soya because sometimes comes overcooked, no? What you do is you need to make a good assessment of the soya or good assessment of the slaughter house byproducts, and then you use it in the comfortable zone, no? One thing that I want to remind is that when you use these kind of products, you are going to have an additional phosphorus in the diet that might not be the good idea sometimes. So if you put too much, let's say if you put high levels of meat and bone meal, for example, you will need to increase the calcium levels to compensate the excess of the phosphorus that the diets are bringing. So, I mean, as long as you know what you have in your feed mill, you can use it.
What is the energy setting in the developer pallet?
Yes.
10 to 17 weeks in kilocalories per kilograms.
Yeah, I mean, usually we are recommending around between 2,700 and 2,750. The lower, the better, because then you are going to stimulate the feed intake. But sometimes it's difficult to go so low, 2,700, 700, because you need several byproducts and not always are available, no? So byproducts like wheat bran, DDGS, rice bran, coconut meal, palm kernel meal. I'm trying to see the map here if I remember anything that I'm missing. Look, also barley as a cereal is a very good source to use in pulled diets. Not always available around the world, and also I almost forgot sunflower meal, very useful for making pulled diets. Also a little bit of rapeseed meal can be useful. So there are a lot of byproducts that can help us to reach those 2,700, but always need to be balanced and see also the consistency of the feed, because sometimes the feed could become too bulky. So take that one into account.
The same question in layer hens.
Same question, the energy. Well, the energy is something that the nutritionist has to decide. I mean, one of the things that we always say in H&N is that we know that the daily needs of the birds. Let's say a brown bear, mature brown bear, is going to need around a brown bear is going to be 314 kilocalories. A white bear is going to need around 295, 300 kilocalories. They're somewhere, 295 probably. So then the question is, those 295 kilocalories of the white bear, how do you want to package it? No? What is going to be the target feed intake? That doesn't mean that we need to restrict the birds, but that's it. Like when you make the feed or when you have to formulate is, okay, this bird should eat 110 grams, 115 grams to achieve the whole nutrient intake, no? So based on that, you need to make the math and see what is going to be the calculation of the feed. I mean, I have a quite nice slide that I usually show sometimes when I go around. I said, okay, we have our Nick chick, that is our one of our white birds, no? And in the US, it is eating, I mean, if you see the production data, is going to eat 105 grams, 106 grams. But then when you go and see how it's performing in Turkey, also very good performance, but the Nick chick is eating 115 grams. And then when someone sees this one, says, oh, you changed the genetic. I said, no, is Same parent stock, same genetic, we don't change anything. The choice is that the nutrition is in the US based on the raw materials that they have cheap corn, cheap soya. They make a highly concentrated diets, so they can afford to do that. But then the nutritionist in Turkey said, my feed is not, I mean, my raw materials are not so cheap, so I go for something more diluted. I have the chance of putting some byproducts that they will reduce my cost. Yes, feed intake is going to be higher, but my cost of the production is going to be controlled. No? So these are things that it happens, and when you have the chance of visiting different customers around the world. I don't know, another example, Super Nick. In Europe, you can see that is another Super Nick is one of our white birds that gives big eggs. In Philippines, is going to eat 110 grams. And in Netherlands, is going to eat 120, 125 grams. Is different genetics? No. It's different nutrition that the nutritionists have decided how concentrated or how diluted to make the diet. Well.
Perfect.
I mean, the audience is on fire.
Yes.
They don't want to let me go for sleeping. No, today no sleep, no dinner, whatever. Just
that was the last question.
And no breakfast for you, Juliana. I mean, I think you go for the brunch directly.
Yes, exactly.
Some scrambled eggs with salmon for brunch today.
Yes, smoked salmon.
Definitely.
We want to thank to Dr. Kleyn for sharing so much high quality time with us. And thanks so much, Xavier, for sharing your expertise and for your answers.
Well, thank
and
you.
Big thanks to everyone who joined us and sent your questions. We will come back with another live session on October 14th. Stay tuned and have a great day.